All right, cool. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the March 31st, 2020 MakerDAO community call. My name is David Utrobin. I work doing community development here at the Maker Foundation, and I have the pleasure of facilitating these community calls every Tuesday. As some of you may have noticed, for the last couple of Tuesdays, these calls have not been happening, and instead we've been ramping up on the quantity of governance and risk calls that we've been doing, which is a second community call type of call. Geez, that's redundant, but yeah. So thankfully, things have slowed down in the governance world. We're no longer in like emergency response mode at like the full strength that we were at a week or two ago. So things are normalizing a bit. And so here we are on the 31st at this community call. We usually cover a ton of topics in this call. I go through all of the current things that are going on in governance, partnerships that I'm seeing announced, posts from the foundation and updates from the foundation, tons of highlights from the community, including stuff that our developers are creating, articles, notable threads on Reddit and our forum, and also a few videos and events. But we all know what happened to events. Events are not happening right now, unfortunately. So give me just a second here. I'm gonna give you guys a link to the agenda that I put together for today's call. So if you guys want to see anything and click through to anything that I talk about or cover here, it's all there. And actually, the document is an archive of all of the agendas of 2020. So if you want to look for older things, you can hit Control F or Command F if that's the Mac shortcut, and just search stuff that you're interested in. But nevertheless, I'll actually share my screen and talk through this because I think that might be a bit more engaging than seeing my beautiful face. So give me just a second. And also, if you're on the call, feel free to jump in with questions, jump in with like details I might miss. I'm obviously a human being with a non-computer perfect memory. So definitely jump in if there's any glaring missing things that I should cover. And yeah, and the main purpose of the call is really to disseminate information in like a compact way for people that aren't around like many hours a week to follow along just all of the stuff that's going on. So yeah, let's start up. The TLDR for governance, and hey everybody joining. Sorry, I saw a couple people join, so I'm going to quickly repost the agenda if you guys want to follow along and click through to anything I'm talking about. But yeah, moving forward. Governance. There's a quick TLDR. We actually had 2 executive votes passed this week. And the reason for that is actually kind of a special thing that happened in governance, but there was a bug in the flop auctions that caused about 20 of them to be blocked. And the reason for that is there's I'm just going to give a super brief like technical explanation is that when people clear the debt from the system dead, there's 2 ways to do it: through the heal function and through the kiss function. And since many people, and this is like super simplified, but since many people were calling heal, it kind of like offset this internal system parameter called awe, if I'm not mistaken. You can totally ignore my explanation and go to last week's governance call because Kurt did a phenomenal job explaining exactly the technical details of what happened. But basically, it's not like a critical bug or anything like that. But a bunch of the debt auctions were blocked, and MKR voters came together in the forums after Thursday's call, and actually very quickly voiced their sentiment that they wanted 2 executive votes this week, and they wanted to separate them. So this is part of one of the issues that Maker Governance has been struggling, or not struggling with, but discussing whether or not to bundle technical changes and technical fixes with monetary policy type votes. And so this week, it was very clear that Maker voters and the governance community wanted those split up. So on Thursday, there was an executive vote that basically just did one thing. It unblocked the remaining debt auctions, which is a temporary fix to the actual bug. And I think a solution, a rewrite of the flop contract is on its way, if I'm not mistaken. And if anybody actually wants to jump in from the foundation, because I know a couple of you guys are here, feel free to like correct me if I'm wrong. If that's generally right, that's fine. So yeah, and yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Hey, David. David, it's Brian. Yeah, so there's a couple of solutions. None of them have really been formalized yet, but the one of the solutions might be to make a third contract that lets the public call and perform that that unsticking function, and that way we don't have to redeploy a new flip or a new flop contract. A new flop is an option, but it's a little more tricky and probably a more long-term solution because it is a core contract.
So basically, an unblock button.
Right. Yeah. That anyone can
Pretty
call.
funny.
We probably put it into a keeper, and that's probably a medium-term solution. I'm probably going to be encouraging that we make the change to the flop, but not deploy it unless another issue is found.
Right.
That would require a redeployment.
Yeah, that would be.
None of that's
seems more efficient.
Yeah, none of that's been formally vetted and decided on yet, though. So that's kind of where we're at.
Of course, no doubt. Cool. Thanks for the update. Right on. All right. So yeah. So and in really cool fashion, the executive vote to unblock the remaining debt auctions was passed very quickly. And so we saw the remaining million of system debt get cleared out. I think the auctions were Monday, midday, like 12 noon or something like that. But yeah, don't quote me on that. But either way, all of them are complete. And if you guys look on the DAI stats page, which grabs all that on-chain data from the Maker protocol, you could see that the surplus is below that 50,000 needed for every individual flop auction. So thankfully now we are more or less starting from scratch, and as a result of the zero bid auctions and the things that happened around Black Thursday, we are now above 1 million MKR supply, and yeah, so we're about 6,000 above, which is really it's kind of like a bittersweet thing, because I think a lot of the community, has read in the white paper, MKR is a lender of last resort, a recapitalization source for the system when things go wrong, and not having that actually happen is kind of like a funny universe to live in, because everything's perfect until something goes wrong. And only when something goes wrong will you know if the system works as intended. And although there was a $5 million approximate shortfall and a ton of MKR was minted, basically setting us back for the last couple of years of stability fees in this like super young system, we saw that it worked. And we saw that the public market gobbled up that MKR, recapitalized the system, and as a result of all of this, a ton of innovation to make the system better and a ton of thinking around liquidations and auctions has occurred. And not only that, we've also seen an exponential growth of participation in our forums, a huge increase in just like quality public discourse, and also it gave our governance community a bit of like a sprint, because we managed to do a ton of different things over the last couple of weeks and have a ton of progress in a lot of ongoing conversations. And so I'm going to move forward because I am stuck on this one thing for like 15 minutes or 10 minutes. All right, cool. And the second executive, which actually just recently passed, was to adjust some risk parameters. So this is more of the monetary policy vote that was separated out from the technical fix. So there was a vote. It passed. I think it lowered. Wait, did it actually? Hold on. I kind of might be like not right, but I think I'm right. Either way. I'm pretty sure I'm right. Yeah, it did pass, right? Am I right that it passed, Brian? Kind of like second
Yeah,
guessing myself
it
here.
passed. I think yesterday morning.
Oh yeah, I could actually just check like the stability fee here for USDC, right? You could see that it's yeah, it's 16%. So yeah, it depends. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Sorry about that. One of those Tuesday morning brain lapses. So yeah, the two parameters that were changed were a lowering of the USDC stability fee from 20% to 16%, and this was motivated uh, to basically help the DAI peg come back to a healthy stance of $1. It's currently trading at about $1.02 weighted average over like the course of the last like week or two, which is not good generally speaking. So yeah, governance is working to get the peg back down to $1 by hopefully increasing DAI liquidity from people using USDC as a collateral. And at the same time, rates were kept super low for ETH and BAT. So that's that. But of course, the borrowing on ETH and BAT is largely driven by ETH and BAT market sentiment, and so it's kind of hard when the peg has a small correlation to market sentiment. Like, is it really a stable coin if it has a small correlation? Like that's why it's really important in the long run for the Maker protocol to actually add more different types of collateral. And USDC was a controversial add to a lot of people, but to a lot of other people, it made a lot of sense because number one, it splits the risk. It gives an additional source of liquidity for DAI, and in general, it could be used as a tool for times of liquidity crunches, for keepers, for auctions, for arbitrage during times like that. So overall, it provides a lot of benefit to the protocol and ultimately to DAI users. And then the second thing was that the DAI ETH debt ceiling was lowered by 10 million from 100 to 90 million. This is just standard risk measure. It's not good to have too large of a buffer between the amount of DAI that exists from a collateral type versus like the total ceiling. You always want to keep that somewhat tight, and the reasoning for that has been covered. I'm not going to cover it now because I want to get through this agenda in a good way. But if you're curious about it, definitely ping me. I could link you to perhaps one of the governance calls that we covered kind of the rationale behind that in. There are a number of governance polls that are currently live. We have the usual monetary policy votes, which is the size stability fee adjustment, which is winning at 8%, which, if I'm not mistaken, is the current stability fee, but we could check that right here. Where is it at? Oh yeah, so yeah, it's a vote to get the stability fee 50 basis points up, which is not that big of a change. The governance poll for the ETH and BAT stability fees is winning at 0.5%, so basically a vote for no change. The governance poll for the USDC stability fee adjustment is winning at 16%, so also no change. And then the DSR spread is actually winning at 0.5%, which, oh no, that's also no change. So the other two governance polls, which are kind of special governance polls that don't happen every week, are very relevant. So one of them is related to the emergency shutdown of single collateral DAI. And as a result of the forum polls and the community's participation in thinking of of a shutdown date, there is a on-chain poll to specifically gather MKR voter sentiment, not just forum participant sentiment, on whether we should shut it down through an executive vote on April 24th, 2020, which is less than a month from now. The winning option is actually overwhelmingly yes right now. And so the governance poll is going to run for 7 days, not the usual 3, just to give people a chance to really voice or to really come out in numbers for this vote, because this is a very important vote that affects the remaining customers of SCD and the remaining just kind of everything. So there's a lot to unpack there. And again, I highly encourage you guys to check out last week's governance call. We covered a lot of detail around whether we're ready for a single collateral DAI shutdown, and also there's a couple of threads that I highlight down here that I'll get to that dive into the details of the SCD shutdown. So it looks like we're coming close to that milestone. And then the last governance poll that's going on in governance is the migration contract debt ceiling adjustment. This is also related to the single collateral DAI emergency shutdown because before it can happen, the migration contract debt ceiling has to be set to 0 so that people can't, so that people don't continue to migrate their Psi into DAI. And basically, just as a refresher for those of you on the call that don't know what the migration contract is, when we launched MCD, we provided basically a CDP that is collateralized by Psi that issues DAI. So people were able to swap their Psi for DAI 1-for-1. It basically worked as a 1-for-1 swap, but this Psi is sitting inside of the MCD system. Right, there's 3.4 million Psi backing 3.4 million DAI. And for single collateral shutdown, like in single collateral shutdown, what happens is that Psi becomes a claim on the underlying ETH collateral. So what do you do about this 3.4 million Psi that's sitting in the MCD system? And the basic thinking is that, first of all, you close the bridge one way so that people can't convert Psi into DAI anymore, but people can convert from DAI back into Psi. So people who have positions in single collateral DAI who know about the shutdown can go on and access the DAI liquidity on the regular DAI markets, which are significantly more liquid than Psi, and they could buy up DAI and convert it to Psi using the migration contract to close out their positions if they wish. And so right now we're having a governance poll to basically do that, to technically shut the bridge on one way from Psi to DAI. And yeah, that's step one of what has to happen before an actual shutdown. And there's a lot of interesting conversation in general about the risk measures and all of the kind of moving parts for SCD shutdown. So if you're interested, I'll kind of show you which threads you could look at. There were 2 governance calls last week, Tuesday and Thursday. We produced a written summary of both of those. So if you do not have time for a 1.5 to 2 hour long call, or actually 4 hours of governance calls for last week, you could scroll through these. They're quick 15 to 20 minute reads if you go through all of them, but they capture all of the major points. They have video anchors to all of the sections of the call. So if you're interested in like Vishesh's analysis of the DAI market or Kurt's presentation on why the flop auctions are blocked, you can access those really easily by checking out those summaries. So yeah, governance at a glance. If you're new around here, you might not know about this, but it's a community maintained thread that has a ton of kind of the most relevant and recent conversations happening in governance. Check it out. And I highlighted kind of some of them. So there's a really great thread on the COVID crash situation room. It contains a number of relevant and useful threads and data sources. So if you're researching what's going on around the Black Thursday crash and stuff, this is a really great resource. We have updates on, we have suggestions for updating the signaling guidelines. So the signaling guidelines are basically like a guideline for anybody who's participating in MKR Maker governance through the forum. And so there's a couple of just standards, like if you are polling the community for something, there's certain guidelines that you have to follow as the original poster. And yeah, just generally speaking, these are updated every once in a while by the community. So highly suggest you guys checking it out. and also the original actual guidelines are in Governance at a Glance, so you could check those out there. There's a couple of signal threads. One is, do we compensate vault holders that were completely liquidated? So this has been a huge topic of discussion following Black Thursday. And in general, it seems like the community has converged on we have to wait and see. We have to wait until there's very clear data on what the unexpected losses were for vault holders, right? Because if you were liquidated, you did expect to lose some of your collateral, but maybe not all of it. And so a lot of people are voicing that they need the breakdown and post-mortem first before the community and maker voters can make a decision on whether to compensate vault holders. But then on an even deeper level, there's still gonna, even after the data comes, there's gonna be conversations about how practically to do this, whether it's gonna involve flop auctions or some other method to raise the funds, if people get reimbursed in ETH or if they get reimbursed in DAI. Like, there's a lot of open questions, and it's been totally encouraging to see the maker community actually care about this, because governance isn't like cold-hearted and like screw the users. In fact, maker governance is very carefully designed, and the values behind it are designed so that we do transparent risk management, and we do care very deeply about the end users. And so yeah, so this is going to be an ongoing conversation for the next, I expect, couple of months. So yeah, follow along if you're interested. Signal thread around SCD shutdown. I mentioned this already, and it went to a governance poll, so I actually can skip past that. But if you're curious, you could read through it. There's a ton of great information in there. So onboarding USDC as collateral to mitigate liquidity risk is a really interesting thread as well. I know a ton of people are still very against USDC as collateral. I highly recommend you read this thread. It'll cover all of the pros and cons, and not a very, everybody has bias, right? This was actually written by, I think, Long for Wisdom, who's just an independent community member in Maker Governance. And he does all the pros and cons and points to consider, and he draws largely from the conversation happening in the comments. So super useful thread for those of you who are still thinking about whether USDC is a good thing or a bad thing. The DeFi Consortium on Emergency Shutdown is a thing that's being organized by Rich Keller Lopez. This is actually really cool. So Emergency Shutdown has been a huge under-discussed topic in Maker governance and in DeFi in general. And so this is a community-led initiative to get not only people in Maker governance to better outline and frame the actual implications and technical details of emergency shutdown, but also to invite people from the greater DeFi community, from the greater ETH community, to come and also give their perspective and help them understand how to mitigate the risk in the event of an emergency shutdown, and also to better define when emergency shutdowns are appropriate, etc., etc. So check out that thread if you're interested in helping the mind share that's going to be going into this. I highly recommend it, and I'm really excited to see what this initiative produces. All right, so that's about it for governance. I'm gonna fly through kind of the other stuff, and definitely feel free to jump in, just not with a weird, annoying video. If you want to ask any questions or anything about the governance stuff, and really anything. All right, barring any questions, move forward. For partnerships, integrations, I saw one cool thing. There was Alethea AI allows meme creators to earn crypto. So I think that you could you could stake DAI to reward your favorite meme creators, and this is like an NFT marketplace type of platform, if I'm not mistaken, and they're dubbing the process no loss content sponsoring because users are obviously donating their interest rather than the principal that they're staking. From the foundation, there was a few cool updates in the last couple weeks. This largely went, I guess, underseen, but the transfer of the MKR token control to governance, the final step happened. This has been quite a long time in the making, and it represents a huge step towards decentralization of the Maker protocol. If you are not aware, so previously the Maker Foundation Multisig, also known as the Development Fund, was the owner of the MKR token contract, and so that owner has been set actually to 0, and so the last remaining authority for the MKR ERC20 token contract is actually DS Pause, which is the governance security module, which is just to say that the only group that can change anything about the MKR token is MKR voters through the executive vote function of the Maker protocol. So yeah, so that happened, and it's pretty exciting, but it happened in a very tumultuous time. So I don't think people are giving it the credit it really deserves, but I'm excited about it. Moving forward, Oasis Trade added a few new assets on there: WBTC, TUSD, PAX, and Link. The team, the foundation, also managed to scrape together a beta of a friendly UI for participating in Maker auctions. At the moment, it only allows people to participate in debt auctions, aka flop auctions, aka the flop auctions that create MKR. But it is the intention of the team to build out the functionality for collateral auctions as well. There's debt auctions, collateral auctions, and surplus auctions. Yeah, so exactly. So yeah, all three auction types are meant to be supported on this UI eventually, but in the very short week of time that they spent working on this, oh yeah, don't have my wallet connected there, but either way, in the very short week of working on this, actually can't join it because I don't have a wallet on this browser. But it's okay. But either way, check it out if you're interested. It's a super sleek UI. I actually really like it, and it also has like a filter feature so that you could look for auctions both by the auction ID, also by pretty much by a number of different filters. All right, highlights from the community. We got a couple of things. What's up, Scott? Here's I'm gonna repost this for keep things fresh. If you want to follow along and click through it to any of the links, there's an agenda there. So yeah, highlights from the community for contributors this week. The team of community development contributors, which is actually a group of about 6 or 7, maybe even 10 people who are kind of producing resources and educational material and guides for the greater MakerDAO community. And so we actually put out a guide on producing a summary. So it's a governance call summary guide. So we produce the summary for every Thursday's governance call, and really for every governance call. For example, last week when there were 5, we produced summaries for all of those. Yeah, so there's a guide to kind of make this a standalone function. So it's not just one person that does this. We want to have summaries of these calls consistent and sustainable through the life of the protocol, if the calls are still a thing. But obviously, Maker protocol is dynamic and always changing. So in the meantime, we have a guide for anybody in the community. They could jump in. They could come and help with these. And so yeah, sorry, jumbling words. We are always looking for people to help with these, and we compensate people who help with these. So join us in the community development chat if you're interested in helping, or just DM me, and I'll gladly put you on if you're interested. Compound hits less than 1 million Psi and disables deposits of Psi, and they obviously they are continuing to enable withdrawing and repaying Psi positions in perpetuity. So that's a cool thing just to highlight. Another thing is someone paid $3,000 per maker in actually I think 2 of the last flop auctions. I don't know. I don't think it was just one of them. I think I remember 2, but I might be wrong. So yeah, somebody fat fingered a flop auction, unfortunately for them. What else? All right, so let's launch into some developer creations. In the wake of Black Thursday, Vishesh blessed us with MakerVault.decipher.io, which is a really, really useful dashboard in order to see like the overall collateralization. I don't know what's going on here. The overall, actually, I think I could just click through here, right? Yeah. The overall collateralization of vaults in the Maker protocol. And it might take a second to load, but I would love to show you guys on the call. Yeah, here it is. And he also updated it shortly after we added USDC to accompany different assets. So you could look at anyone, and basically it also has a filter system where you could order vaults by ID, by vault. I actually don't know what this is, but by collateral, by debt, by collateralization level, by liquidation price, and this one, which is, I'm not sure because it's out of the view. Oh, collateralization bucket, right? Because he buckets he takes all the vaults and buckets them out, and you could see where the most vaults, or at least the most debt, is located. So there's about 30 plus million debt sitting in 300 to 350% collateralized vaults. Like the most at-risk vaults contain about 1 million. The second layer, so you could see kind of like these tranches of risk and how much DAI stands to be liquidated in the case that any of these get liquidated, right? So yeah, that is that. And it's actually a series of Decipher.io dashboards. There's also DAI.decipher.io, which gives really great data on the peg. And there's also loans.decipher.io, which gives really good info on the secondary lending markets and the activity of DAI there. So yeah, it was just launched on the 15th. We also, actually, I think this is from the foundation, but we launched this data dashboard to track the debt auctions, which obviously have all concluded. So hopefully this dashboard is not needed for quite a while. We also saw somebody in the community come out with this site, catflip.co/changelog. So with every executive vote that passes that changes like system parameters, it's often hard to like see exactly what changed and understand exactly what parameters were changed. I really love like the format of this site. So whoever made it, huge thank you. And I know a ton of people have expressed the same sentiment. So I think that this is just super, super cool. So very awesome way to see changes made through executive votes on a slightly more technical level. DeFi Saver introduced a simple MakerDAO collateral auctions dashboard as well as a result of Black Thursday. So you could check it out over here. So again, this is just expanding the I guess, pool of people that are willing to participate as keepers, which ultimately strengthens the performance of the protocol and the performance of liquidations during times like Black Thursday. We also saw collateralswap.com, which is a pretty interesting project. It it does like single transaction swapping of vault types. So like if you have an ETH vault and it's just getting crazy and you want to de-risk yourself, you could convert your ETH vault into a USDC vault through a single transaction. I think actually, funny enough, I think Dave actually just joined the call a few minutes ago, but he's the guy behind collateralswap.com. So actually, if David, if you have a second, do you want to talk? Just give us like a few sentences on the idea behind collateral swap and like why it's valuable to vault owners.
Hey, can you hear me?
Hey, yeah, I could hear you.
Awesome. Thanks for letting me on.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah, so collateral swap, so it's basically a way to swap your collateral, like Dave already mentioned. The new thing that I implemented was that USDC swap. So
Right.
the point of it was to make it so then if the ETH price tanks like it did last time, then you could swap your vault into USDC, then you won't get liquidated. But there's another feature where you can liquidate the vault straight into any asset that you want. So even if you want to close your vault, you can liquidate entirely into USDC or entirely into I don't know, whatever WBTC if you want.
Right
and
on.
that all happens in one transaction.
Cool. Yeah. So and David actually was planning to come on to one of these community calls in the coming weeks to show off collateral swap a little bit and do some Q&A about it. But we are figuring out a date right now. Originally, he was supposed to come on next week, but next week I unfortunately had to cancel that, and yeah, we're gonna move that a few weeks forward. But either way, super cool. Developer creation also updated as a result of Black Thursday. And then lastly, there was another cool thing I saw on Twitter, Operation Save DAI, which is a UI for taking a leveraged DAI short using a Maker Vault, if I'm not mistaken. This was done by Andre Kronge, who's the guy behind, I think, Curve Finance, and a bunch of stuff. So yeah, mint DAI with USDC at 5 times leverage, take an immediate DAI short position, and basically this is just a way to do that impure arbitrage on the DAI peg. And I say impure because it's not a complete arbitrage because you still have that time risk. So if you're paying fees for borrowing DAI against USDC, and you don't know when the DAI peg is going to go back down, so you can close your arb, you incur that kind of risk that's not present with like a complete arb, where you could just do in a one single time, like a full transaction or a full profit opportunity. All right, so wrapping it up, some articles. These are articles from the past 2 weeks that I thought were really well done. So there's one from buildblockchain.tech. It's a really great newsletter. It's how MakerDAO survived Black Thursday, and they cover kind of what happened and then the community response, which I think is really important to cover. That paints a more complete picture of what's really going on. There was also this post from Multicoin Capital, March 12th, the day crypto market structure broke, and I thought it was a very insightful piece on just precisely what happened, and also like BitMEX's role, and in general, just gives you a better understanding of the structure of the crypto market compared to the traditional market, right? There's also an article from CoinDesk, MakerDAO's problems are a textbook case of governance failure. This was an op-ed by, I forgot the exact author's name, but they work for Prism Group, which is actually a really cool group that does analysis around governance structures in blockchain tech. So this was, I thought, an insightful article, but take it with grains of salt. But regardless, super interesting. I found it great. Black Thursday at DeFi Saver. there was an article. So DeFi Saver are so good at communicating with their customers and giving transparent updates on just the stats and kind of their response to when things were going wrong. And they did an absolutely stellar job during Black Thursday. So check out their thread. There's also this one, building the post-liquidation era. This was a thoughtful piece by the guys at Aave, and they mentioned kind of the utility of flash loans during liquidation crises and how they were used to help a ton of positions, keep a ton of positions from being liquidated, and in general, just kind of their vision for the future and their belief that liquidations are going to become more efficient, and there's going to be better protections for users in the form of services like DeFi Saver and flash loans, right? So I thought it was also a great piece. And then lastly, this is actually, I think, an academic paper on decentralized finance, basically breaking down the DeFi stack. And I think it got like it got famous for this, or at least I saw people on Twitter really liking this diagram right here. Yeah, so check it out. I think you have to like actually sign up to get this PDF. So yeah, don't have a link to the direct PDF, unfortunately. And then coming close to the end here, notable threads. Adrian Hacker has continued to push out his weekly digest, and it's getting better and better every week. Again, he's super open to help with it, to feedback about it. So definitely check out this thread and give your comments. And also, it's just a really great short update on what's been going on for the past week. An alternative, again, to this call, an alternative to a number of sources. So it's nice to see centralized sources of, synthesized data about what's going on in Maker Universe. There's also this really interesting thread that I wanted to highlight, the risk of pro-cyclical MKR issuance. And the points were basically that recapitalization is likely to be needed when overall market sentiment and generally prices are low. So basically, the system is set up to buy high and sell low. And over time, and like the idea is because MKR price was low and we had to do MKR issuance, instead of like 5,000 being issued to cover the shortfall, 15,000 had to be issued. And the thread is basically inviting people to think about how over time this could lead to excessive dilution, and how do we better design the system to kind of prevent the cons of this kind of like design. But either way, interesting conversation. There's this Reddit thread that I wanted to highlight. Where's the accountability? This was also just in response to Black Thursday. And I think that it's just really important for visibility, for people to see kind of the responses of users of the protocol. So yeah, read through it. It's a good thread. There's a ton of really thoughtful comments and information in there. And then lastly, also an interesting thread, not super critical, but there was an idea on Reddit for a tokenized crypto sentiment inverse derivative. I mean, and obviously take it with a grain of salt, but basically something that's the opposite correlation to crypto markets, which totally, I really hope an asset like that, like the tricky part is, right, like figuring out if this asset has a lot of risk or not, which derivatives tend to have a lot of hidden risk. But again, interesting thought piece and interesting conversation happening in that thread. And then lastly, the two videos I highlighted were a Chinese tutorial of how to set up an auction keeper bot, and also from the Thursday governance and risk call, Kurt Barry's presentation on the debt auction blocking in MakerDAO. Yeah, right on. So I'm gonna stop presenting. That's pretty much it for everything I had on the agenda. And so I'm gonna open it up if you guys want to ask any questions or add anything I might have missed. Yeah, Brian's exactly right. Someone has to make it, and then eventually risk teams, and analysts will have to do an evaluation on it. And Hans wrote, like they evaluated USDC? Sort of, but hopefully a more thorough investigation. And I think like because of the, I guess, because of the early, so the risk team is producing a lot of documentation behind the scenes to better outline for the public like the collateral onboarding and assessment processes. And I think that even when you have the best assessment of a collateral, like there's still that tail risk, right, of USDC, like just freezing USDC, right, and then like screwing over MKR holders and vault holders. But in the model, when you do the assessment, it's still a model, right? It doesn't perfectly represent reality. It gives almost like it's like putting a best educated guess on the interest you have to charge to cover like that risk. But yeah, definitely agree in the sentiment, Hans, that there's got to be better evaluation because the best educated guess is the best way to manage the system, right? Brian wrote, Rune has been talking about adding stablecoins since pre-MCD launch. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, even pre-SCD launch. Yeah, there's been a ton of conversation about adding stablecoins and centralized assets in general that carry that kind of custodial risk. But again, custodial risk is like one of the many different risks that an asset can carry, right? There's technical risk, there's political and regulatory risk, there's market risks, and all of those have to fit into this risk assessment model and spit out a number for what's the risk premium. Yeah, there's Brian posted that thread there. I'll actually throw it in the agenda for anybody listening to the recording of this call. You could check it out. I'll make a little links section on the bottom of the March 31st agenda. All right, so barring any other questions, comments, inquiries, I think we're gonna end the call here in a minute. And thank you guys for coming out. Really glad to see the numbers here, and I hope this call was informative to you guys. And if you have any feedback on the call, feel free to message me. If you have any ideas for interesting guests on the call for the near future, definitely message me. Always looking to make this more engaging and more valuable to the community. All right, so with that, I'm gonna hit the stop recording button.